Good morning, everybody. Can you see my screen, Walter?
Yes, we can. We can see your screen, so we can see already your presentation. Well, you're Professor Sara Wilkinson from the University of Technology in Sydney. It's great to have you with us.
Perfect person to be talking right now, and we are so excited about the different points that you're going to hit, talking about sustainability, technology. Yeah, I can't wait.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much for inviting me. It's a great pleasure to participate in this fantastic conference. So, shall I begin?
Yes, you can kick it off.
Fantastic. Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody. I understand that we're spread all around the world today for this conference. And the topic that I'm going to talk about this morning is how can we prevent our cities from becoming ghost cities after the pandemic? By future-proofing our buildings, perhaps. We can't predict the future, but we can look back and analyse history. By looking at how ghost towns become established, we may be able to prevent it from happening again. I'm very fortunate to be working with 3 universities in Finland, Aalto, Tampere and Turku, who have secured funding for the RESCUE project. And RESCUE stands for Real Estate Sustainability and Crisis in Urban Environments. And I'll tell you a little bit about this project as we go through the presentation. Okay. Going too fast, apologies for that. So this is the structure of what I'm going to talk about today, a little bit about resilience and sustainability and some examples that in history of both of those. I'll also talk about the only constant is change. And then I'll move on to look at future-proofing our buildings and then talk about the rescue project and the Futures Wheel methodology, which is being adopted there to analyse how we can future-proof our buildings. So let's have a look at sustainability and resilience. Okay. So climate change, population growth, changing weather, floods, droughts, hurricanes, economic depressions, pandemics. There's nothing new here. We've always experienced these events. And here are a couple of examples. On the left-hand side, we see the town of Valhalla in Victoria in Australia. And this was a gold rush town in the 19th century. At its height, it had a population of 4,000 people. It's now truly a place that is frozen in time. There's one road in and one road out. The town was famously only connected to the electricity grid in 1998, just over 23 years ago. The town features many intact and well-restored heritage buildings surrounded by walking trails and campsites. Usually you can take a guided tour of the gold mine if you don't mind the dark, but due to economic decline, when there was no more gold, we've experienced gradual chronic decline and a reduction in population. And by 2016, Valhalla only had 20 people living there. The other example on the right-hand side is from Bomenidi, and I hope I've pronounced that correctly. It's a Dutch village that was flooded in 1682 in January, and the destruction was so great that the Estates of Holland decided not to rebuild the village, and the last inhabitants left in 1684. Some remains of the village still remain visible. Nowadays, there's still some overgrown debris of the waters of the flood. This is an example of chronic and acute stresses and strains and shocks. A flood is unpredictable and it can be catastrophic, as the people of Bomonidi experienced. So we need, amongst other things, to make our buildings carbon positive, circular, smart, and we need to make our communities strong, connected, and empathetic. So history and experience tells us that these shocks and stresses we know what they are, but what do you, I, and we need to do? What action do we need to take? I said at the beginning, the only constant is change. This is actually a quotation from a Roman, Heraclitus, who said that in 500 BC, so over 2,500 years ago. So he was acknowledging that things change all the time. And this building is a good example of a building that has been in continuous use for over 1,000 years. This is the Tower of London in the UK. The White Tower was originally built in 1078. Throughout its history, the tower has served many different purposes. It housed the Royal Mint until the 19th century, a menagerie, which I understand is a diverse or strange collection of wild animals, people, or things. And the menagerie was there until 1835. It also had a records office and was used as an armory and barracks for troops. And until the 17th century, it was used as a royal residence. So it's been a prison, a fortress, a home, and now a tourist attraction. I think this is quite a good example of a future-proof building. It's been able to accommodate a diverse range of uses. I want to talk about future-proofing our buildings and how the factors that we take into account. So on this slide here, I've started off with Pestle Factors. Now, Pestle is a framework that I've been using for a number of years now. And the P in Pestle is political, the E is economic, the S is social, the T is technological, the L is legal, and the last D is environmental. And what I find is when I put Pestle down and I start to think of all the factors, I know that I've covered pretty much everything by grouping them under those different headings. The other thing that research tells us is that buildings need to be flexible. And the example of the Tower of London was a good example of a building that's been around for over 1,000 years and has served many different purposes. It's also adaptable. So physically being able to change and alter the building, perhaps to accommodate more floors, to extend it laterally, to make rooms bigger or smaller inside the building. So being adaptable is a very important factor. When we look at resilience, the criteria of resilience are durability, but also flexibility, to be able to recover quickly. And a good example would be with flood-prone buildings, locating them on stilts so that water can flow underneath the building when it floods and not through the property and damaging all the goods. In flood-prone areas, having the electrical services mounted a metre or so above the floor level, so that if there is water damage at low level, it doesn't affect the electrical installation in the building. So in design, we can think about the measures that we can take so that when the inevitable happens, we can recover quickly. And then sustainability. So sustainability, we're looking at criteria such as low embodied energy, having our buildings designed to work with the climate, a changing climate, to have buildings that are repairable, that are flexible and adaptable. We need frameworks and tools, and there are some frameworks for adaptive reuse, which is conversion, known as conversion in the UK, and retrofitting, that have been developed by academics such as Hilde Riemoy in the Netherlands, Sheila Conagos in Singapore, Gillian Armstrong, and Shabjan Yadani Mayer in Australia. And these frameworks have looked at trying to assist the decision-making with altering buildings as things change over time. We also have green building tools which offer frameworks on sustainability and energy use across most land types. So they have tools for offices, for residential, for retail and industrial. The question is, what would future-proofing tools and frameworks need to consider? And that's where we come to our rescue project. The building in this slide is the golf club in the village that I was brought up in Essex in England. And this was a Tudor building that was the family home of the Boleyn family. And it once had a moat around it, but it's now the golf club. So there's another future-proof building. So the rescue project. This is an exciting project that is being undertaken by the Universities of Tampere, Aalto and Turku. It's a 4-year project funded by the Academy of Finland that started this year. And they're adopting a Futures Will methodology.
Okay.
So they're looking to use case studies from different countries and cities. And in 2022, the team are coming to Sydney to collect data and share their knowledge. And we're very excited about that. Their aim is to develop a greater understanding of the relationship between the Pestle Factors and the first and secondary impacts and first order and second order consequences. So if you look at the diagrams on the right-hand side of the slide, you can see in the center we have a trend or an event, and then say the event was the pandemic. The first set of questions that we ask ourselves is, what are the impacts of COVID? And it might be that people couldn't go out, we couldn't go to work, people got sick. And then once we've brainstormed all of those first events, and then we say, well, what are the secondary impacts of that? So say people not being able to go to work, maybe it was challenges with working at home because the house wasn't big enough for people to be working and children at school, schooling from home. Or it might be for another person that it was loneliness because they live alone. So with this methodology, we're able to do a complete 360 brainstorm of all the consequences and impacts that occur from the trend or event. And then, as you can see in the image above, these can be color-coded according to whether they're environmental, economic, social impacts, and so on. So I think this is a very exciting methodology to be working on. to get a greater and deeper understanding of the relationships between the Pestle Factors and the impacts of different events that can impact on real estate. Just coming to the penultimate slide here. Now, this was a headline in the Sydney Morning Herald from a couple of weeks ago, predicting only 50% of workers will return to the city CBD and what will happen to the buildings. So is this what happened to Valhalla in Victoria when the gold ran out? Our cities are much larger and much more complex. Maybe we will end up with ghost pockets for periods. How long will they last? Will they be short-term or long-term? If we develop a greater understanding and then tools and frameworks, maybe we can create opportunities and revitalization and future-proof our towns and our cities. So just to sum up, I think we need to understand that these events have happened before and they will happen again. We should design, build and operate buildings and spaces that are flexible, adaptable, sustainable and resilient. And we should ensure that we have empathetic governance and high social sustainability, because buildings are only half the story, communities are the other half. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope you enjoy the conference. No doubt you'll get plenty of ideas and inspiration over the next 3 days about how to future-proof your buildings. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Sara.
That was amazing. I loved that. Thank you. And it was really nice to kind of compare. Sometimes we get stuck in situations and we think, oh, this has never happened before. But there are things that have happened that are similar. And I really loved what you said about our cities are more diverse now than the gold rush, for example. When the gold's gone, the city kind of goes away. But now our cities are more complicated. We have different industries. And I thought that was really, really interesting. So do you have any kind of global analysis? Do you think there are certain areas that will have more of a rush from the cities? Do you think that there's differences in like the global scope?
It's really, really interesting, I think, because we're less able to travel. We're relying on talking to one another rather than seeing it all with our own eyes. And I know that there have been, say, a number of issues in, say, the North American Rust Belt, where the car manufacturing sort of left the cities of Detroit and Michigan. And they had a lot of vacancy there for a long time. I think we've got also experiences on the north coast of Canada with the fishing communities, where the ships got larger and larger and they couldn't actually get into some of the ports, and so those ports declined. So I think we've got lots of things that have happened in the past and even more recently, and I think it's understanding what the cause was in that particular incidence, and whether it's a short-term thing or whether it's a more long-term situation that you need to deal with differently.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so less about the global and more about kind of the diversification instead of there. Yeah, I remember the example in Michigan. They were selling 12 houses at a time, I think, in a bundle for almost nothing.
Yeah.
You could buy
Yeah.
Really?
12. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the car manufacturing took a big hit.
Yeah.
So, but Detroit is coming back now.
Yeah.
And we're really happy that there's
Yeah.
resilience.
Yes, I think sometimes they bounce back and they're actually better than they were before. And again, I think if you look at a lot of our older cities, our European cities, There's lots of examples of economic depression and decline, and then a rebirth and revitalization. And that is quite exciting, because one would hope we can build back better.
Absolutely. And that kind of almost goes into our next session. So maybe we should actually ask you a question about that, the healthy buildings. Do you have any thoughts about this concept of healthy buildings, you know, this push towards this? Do you have any recommendations, hopes? Very broad question.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, using sort of natural materials, materials that don't off gas and leak chemicals is a great idea. And I do a lot of work with green infrastructure, so green walls and green roofs, and because of the biophilia effect, the calming effect that people have when they're close to nature. So yeah, I think they're healthy buildings, and we need to focus on that very much.
Well, we're going to talk about that for sure later today.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to thank you very much, Sarah, for being with us this morning for us. So it was really amazing, and I hope you have a great time there in Australia.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Have a great conference.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.